Welcome back to Studio Bodhi. In today's video, we will be doing a much awaited tutorial on kettle painting. How do you paint a kettle or teapot using acrylic paints? All the art supplies needed for this tutorial are shared in the video going ahead. So let's get started. This is the kettle that we are going to be painting today. It's a metal kettle which is an aluminium base, and I think there is some kind of coating on it, but this is the kettles I usually use for my kettle painting. Now, before you actually start the painting, it's very important for you to make sure that there are no stickers or labels or any kind of paper attached to the kettles or stuck onto the kettles. And if you have any of those things, then please make sure that you have removed them, and if there are any glue marks on the kettle, then those are wiped clean as well. Now, the first step in kettle painting is what we call as putting a primer. To put a primer, we use something called as a gesso. It's called a gesso primer, and this is easily available in most art stores across the world. This is a simple white acrylic paint. It looks like a white acrylic paint, but actually it's white acrylic paint with some other substances in it, which gives it a slightly gluey texture and which makes sure that when you apply this onto any surface which is metal or glass or wood, it puts a good solid base onto your surface. And after this, when you apply acrylic paints, it makes sure that the acrylic paints are set well on the surface and that they don't peel off. So we will start with applying the gesso first. The way to apply the gesso is to actually use a flat brush and simply put it on the surface of the kettle in very smooth and even strokes. You may want to thin down your gesso a bit if you think it's too thick. The only tip here is to make sure that whatever direction you are using for painting the kettle, you keep the direction consistent. Avoid strokes in different directions, as that can create a slightly uneven finish when you finally start painting on the kettle. An important part to remember is that typically when you're doing kettle painting, you might need around 2 coats of gesso, as even though you've used a thicker version of the gesso, one coat might not be enough, and it might not coat through the surface of the kettle evenly. So when the first coat dries, you can apply the second coat in the same manner. As you can see, we have finally finished putting the gesso on the kettle, and I have done 2 coats. And after 2 coats of gesso, this is the finish that ideally you should be having. The finish should be smooth and clean. Try and avoid any lumps coming in when you're doing the gesso, because these lumps can actually then show up when you're doing your acrylic painting on top. Now, ideally, after gesso, you can actually start painting with acrylic paints. However, as a part of this painting process, I usually also do 1 extra coat of acrylic white paint. I use the Daler & Rowney graduate brand, and I use this white paint, acrylic paint, and put 1 more coat on top of the gesso before I actually start drawing and painting with acrylic paint. The way to do that is very similar to having coated with gesso. So you take the acrylic colors on a palette, and with the same flat brush, using exactly the same technique, flat and in one direction, you put the acrylic paint. And usually for the acrylic paint, 1 coat should be enough. The reason I put in acrylic paint is because if there are any flaws in your gesso painting, if there are any patches which have been left uncovered or not as even, then the acrylic paint coat helps to even that out a bit more. So I have finished putting the acrylic paint on the kettle, and my kettle is fully dried up after the acrylic paint, and as you can see, there is a clean, white, smooth coat on the kettle. You can't really see the actual color of the kettle after it's been coated, and that's how your finish should be, that you should not be able to see what the actual kettle looks like after the gesso and the acrylic paint have been done on it. The finish needs to be smooth, even, with no lumps and no patches. Now, your kettle is now ready to be painted on, but before painting, the first step before that is to actually draw your design out. Once you have selected the design, you have two options of drawing the design on your kettle. One is that you can actually draw the design with your hand using a normal pencil. The second option is that you can trace your pattern out using a tracing paper like this. This is a Coors brand tracing paper, and usually these tracing papers are available very easily across the world in most stationery stores, and they're fairly cheap and reasonable. So this is the pattern that I have decided to use on my kettle. This is a design that I have already drawn out on a paper before and taken a print of it, and I'm now going to use the tracing paper that I shared with you and trace it on the kettle. So this is how the tracing will look once you have finished tracing the pattern, and I have done both the styles. I have used a tracing paper, and I have also used a pencil to draw directly some parts of the pattern which I thought it was easier to draw, and similarly you can draw out your pattern all over the kettle. So we have finished tracing out the entire pattern, and as you can see, the pattern is done all over the base of the kettle. And now the next step is to actually start painting your pattern using acrylic paints. So I have decided to take a red color as my base, and that's the color I'm going to be using around my pattern. we have finally finished painting the kettle with this floral pattern, and this is what the kettle looks like. You can see I have painted the spout, the handle, and the lid as well, and this is what the top of the kettle looks like from all sides. So once you have finished painting your kettle, the last part of the process is to apply varnish. Now, why is varnish important? For two reasons. One is that the varnish actually brings out and enhances the vibrancy of your colors, and secondly and most importantly, it protects your colors from any kind of damage or scratching. Now, what I will be using here will be something called as the gloss varnish. This is basically a little shiny varnish, and it looks white, but actually it's transparent when you apply. And to apply it, you simply need to remove it in a palette and use any flat brush to apply it. The process is very similar to what you would do while you apply an acrylic paint, a primer coat or acrylic base paint coat. And we have finally finished varnishing the kettle, and this is what your kettle looks like after it's been varnished. As you can see, there's a beautiful shine and glow to the kettle, which is coming because of the varnish, and the kettle is now ready to be used. So our beautiful kettle is finally done and ready to be used. Thank you for watching this video, and I hope you found this video useful. To watch more such videos and tutorials, please do press the bell icon and the subscribe button. And we'd love to hear back from you, so please do send in your feedback and your comments on this video, and also let us know what other videos and tutorials you'd like us to post next. Till next time, happy painting.